Let's talk about one man, a man no election put in power, and no vote could ever remove. For 36 years, he held the keys to the most formidable military in the Middle East. He oversaw a nuclear program that gave the Western world sleepless nights. And he commanded a shadow army of proxy forces spread across 5 different countries, forces that answered to him and to him alone. To millions of his people, he was a revolutionary guardian, a protector. To millions of others, he was a tyrant. 6 American presidents, one after another, tried to contain him, to isolate him, to somehow break his will. None of them ever succeeded. He was the constant, the unmovable object at the very center of global geopolitics, a figure of absolute, unquestioned authority whose every decision could ignite a region and shift the balance of world power with a single command. He was a survivor, a master strategist, and for a nation of 88 million people, he was the final word on matters of war and peace. His name was Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. His rule, you see, defined an entire era of confrontation. From the maze-like corridors of power in Tehran, he commanded it all: the army, a vast intelligence network, the incredibly powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the entire judiciary, and a sprawling economic empire that was built on foundations of both faith and steel. His defiance of American power became a cornerstone of his identity, and really, a central pillar of global strategy for 2 full generations of world leaders. Think about it: the stability of one of the world's most volatile regions, the flow of nearly a fifth of the world's oil, and that ever-present nagging question of nuclear proliferation, all of it, every last bit, rested on the shoulders and in the mind of this single, unelected figure. His shadow stretched from the shores of the Levant all the way to the Persian Gulf, a constant, simmering challenge that shaped alliances, fueled devastating conflicts, and held the entire world in a state of perpetual unresolved tension. And then, just like that, in an instant, the alert. The one that flashed across every news terminal, every intelligence screen, and every single mobile phone on the planet. A single sentence that brought the entire machinery of global power to a grinding halt. Within just a few hours, the whispers and rumors hardened into fact. The White House issued a terse, very carefully worded statement confirming the intelligence. The man who had defied American influence longer than any other living adversary was gone. And in that one moment, in every capital city from Washington to Moscow, from Jerusalem to Beijing, a single unifying realization took hold. The Middle East, and by extension the world, had just been fundamentally and irrevocably changed. The decades-long stalemate was officially over. A new and deeply, deeply uncertain chapter had just begun. What you're about to see is the story of that change. This is an analysis of how the end of one man's 36-year reign can light a fuse that stretches across the entire globe. Together, we're going to unpack how a poor boy from a holy city became one of the most powerful unelected leaders on Earth. We'll look at how he constructed a system of absolute control that was designed to outlast him, and we'll examine how he crushed every single challenge that ever rose up against him. To truly understand the consequences that are rippling across the world right now, we first need to understand the man and the system he built. This is the story of how power was forged, how it was held, and what happens when it is suddenly, unexpectedly gone. In these immediate aftermath hours, the world is asking questions that no one can really answer yet. In capitals across the globe, the exact same urgent calculations are being made. You see, power abhors a vacuum, and the one left behind by Khamenei is immense, it's dangerous, and it's filled with a profound sense of uncertainty. Right now, every diplomatic channel is buzzing with activity. Every military command is on its highest alert. The decisions that are made in the next few hours and days will have consequences that could reverberate for decades, shaping the future of conflict, the price of energy, and the very nature of international security. So let's ask the big questions. Who has their finger on the button of Iran's nuclear program tonight? Will Hezbollah, the Houthis, and that whole network of militias across the region go rogue, or will they simply collapse without their patron? Is this the moment that 70 million young Iranians, an entire generation that has only known this one system, finally see an opening to break free? And could this single event drag the United States, Israel, and other regional powers into a wider conflict that nobody wants, but maybe nobody can stop? The answers to these critical questions lie in the story of the man himself and the intricate system of power he so carefully created. So let's begin. To really comprehend the crisis of today, we have to journey back to its origins. The story of Ali Khamenei is completely intertwined with the story of modern Iran, a narrative forged in the fires of poverty, revolution, and a brutal, unwavering conviction. His rise to the top was not preordained, it wasn't guaranteed. It was the product of a nation at war with itself, and a world order that was in total flux. His path to power, a path marked by imprisonment, survival, and incredibly shrewd political maneuvering, helps explain the very nature of the regime he built, and the volatile legacy he now leaves behind for the entire world to confront. He was born Sayyid Ali Khamenei in 1939 in Mashhad, one of the holiest cities for Shia Muslims. His family was poor. He was the son of a low-ranking cleric in a household where dinner was often just bread and yogurt. But what that home lacked in material wealth, it more than possessed in religious conviction. From a very young age, he was immersed in the world of the seminary, studying Islamic jurisprudence, philosophy, and the far more dangerous subject of politics. The Iran of his youth was a country in turmoil. The monarch, the Shah, was aggressively pushing a Western-style modernization program, funded by oil wealth and backed by the United States. To many devout Iranians, it felt like a foreign occupation of their own culture. It was in this crucible of discontent that Khamenei discovered the teachings of a fiery, exiled cleric, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Khomeini preached that Islamic scholars shouldn't just advise society, they should rule it absolutely, a revolutionary concept. Khamenei became a devoted disciple, and he was willing to suffer for this belief. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, the Shah's notoriously brutal secret police, called SAVAK, arrested him multiple times for his dissident activities. Each imprisonment, each interrogation, only seemed to harden his resolve. When the Shah finally fell in the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Khomeini returned in triumph, and Khamenei was part of that inner circle. He rose quickly through the new power structure. Then, in 1981, during a press conference, a bomb that was concealed in a tape recorder on the podium right in front of him exploded. The blast tore through his body, shattering his shoulder, severing his vocal cords, and permanently paralyzing his right arm. To survive an attack like that was seen by many of his followers as a sign of divine protection. That frozen, useless arm became a visible symbol of his revolutionary credentials. He served 2 terms as president during the brutal 8-year war with Iraq, a conflict that really solidified the new republic's identity. But even then, he was largely seen as a secondary figure. So when Khomeini died in 1989, a vicious power struggle erupted. Khamenei was not the obvious successor. He didn't even have the religious seniority required by the Constitution. But in a swift, opaque process, his powerful allies amended the Constitution, and this quiet, unassuming cleric was chosen. He was underestimated, seen as a placeholder. It was a mistake his rivals, and the world, would come to understand over the next 3 decades, as he methodically, piece by piece, consolidated his power, transforming his office into one of absolute authority. Now, here is a fundamental concept that many people outside of Iran just fail to grasp. Iran holds elections. It has a president and a parliament. People go and cast votes. And on the surface, it projects the image of a republic. But none of that really tells you where the true power actually lies. To understand the sheer scale of the shockwave caused by Khamenei's death, you have to first understand the immense, intricate, and absolute machine of power that he commanded for 36 years. This system was meticulously designed for a single purpose, to ensure that the will of one man defines the fate of the entire nation. For a Western audience, which is so used to the idea of checks and balances, it can be a pretty confusing structure. So let's break down exactly how it works and what he actually controlled. The supreme leader is not a ceremonial figurehead. He is the system. As commander-in-chief, he has the final authority over all branches of the armed forces, including the conventional army and, most critically, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. Now, the IRGC is more than just a military. It's a sprawling ideological and economic empire with vast influence over every single sector of Iranian society. The supreme leader also personally appoints the head of the judiciary, giving him direct control over the courts, law enforcement, and how Islamic law is interpreted. This allows him to shield his allies and prosecute his enemies with the full, unsparing force of the state. He directly controls all state television and radio networks, which allows him to shape the national narrative and control the flow of information to 88 million people. Crucially, he appoints half the members of the Guardian Council, a powerful 12-member body. This council vets all legislation passed by Parliament, but its most significant power is the ability to approve or disqualify any candidate running for elected office, including the presidency. This creates a carefully filtered democracy, where only candidates who are deemed loyal to the system are ever allowed to compete. He sets all major foreign policy doctrines, deciding who Iran's allies and enemies are, and he has the ultimate authority over the country's sensitive nuclear program. The elected president, he manages the day-to-day business of the government, the economy, infrastructure, foreign diplomacy, but on every single decision that truly matters, war, peace, nuclear weapons, the direction of the revolution, the supreme leader has the final, unchallengeable word, period.
For 36 years, that man was Ali Khamenei, and he wielded every lever of this immense power to maintain control and project his vision onto the region and the world. And this is where the story gets deeply uncomfortable, because any honest accounting of a 36-year reign has to grapple with its profound contradictions. Khamenei's legacy is not a monolith. It's viewed through two entirely different and fiercely competing lenses. To his supporters, he was a powerful guardian of the revolution, a bulwark against foreign domination who transformed Iran into a regional superpower. But to his countless critics, both inside and outside the country, he was the architect of a brutal police state that sacrificed its own people's prosperity and freedom for the sake of ideological expansion and regime survival. Both of these arguments have evidence to back them up, and the chasm between them is what defines the Iran he leaves behind.
His defenders will point to a record of what they see as undeniable strategic success. Under his leadership, Iran withstood crippling international sanctions, it developed a sophisticated ballistic missile program, and it built a network of powerful proxy allies across the Middle East. This axis of resistance, from Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Iraq to the Assad regime in Syria and the Houthis in Yemen, gave Tehran unprecedented influence, projecting its power far beyond its borders. They will argue he ensured Iran's independence in a region dominated by American allies and stood firm as a symbol of resistance to Western hegemony. But the cost of this ambition, and this is where his legacy becomes so deeply polarizing, was paid almost exclusively by ordinary Iranians. While his supporters praised him as a champion of sovereignty, his critics, including millions of Iranians who risked their very lives to say so, accused him of presiding over a system that systematically crushed dissent, hollowed out the economy to fund foreign wars, and treated the human rights of its own citizens as secondary to the regime's survival. The historical record of this internal repression is extensive, it's well documented, and it is brutal. Just consider the evidence. In 2009, after a disputed presidential election, millions of Iranians poured into the streets in what became known as the Green Movement. It was the largest demonstration of public dissent since the 1979 revolution itself. Chanting, "Where is my vote?" they demanded transparency and democratic reform. Khamenei's response was swift and it was absolute. He declared the election results valid and then unleashed the state's security apparatus. The crackdown was merciless. Besieged militia forces on motorcycles charged into crowds. Protesters were beaten and killed right there in the streets, and thousands were arrested. The movement's political leaders were placed under house arrest, where they would remain for over a decade without a trial. The message sent to the Iranian people and to the world was unmistakable. Democratic expression in Iran would only be permitted as long as it did not challenge the ultimate authority of the supreme leader. A decade later, in November of 2019, protests erupted again. This time ignited by a sudden, sharp increase in fuel prices. The demonstrations quickly spread across the country, fueled by years of economic hardship under sanctions. What followed was arguably the deadliest crackdown in the Islamic Republic's four-decade history. To prevent the world from witnessing what it was about to do, the government took an unprecedented step. It shut down the entire country's access to the global internet for nearly a week. In that informational darkness, security forces moved to crush the protests with lethal force. When connectivity was slowly restored, a horrifying picture emerged. Investigations by international news outlets and human rights organizations, piecing together videos and witness testimonies, concluded that hundreds, perhaps even over 1,000, unarmed protesters had been killed in a matter of days. The true number remains unknown, a direct result of the regime's effort to commit violence in total secrecy. And then, in the fall of 2022, the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman in the custody of a so-called morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly, ignited a firestorm. The resulting woman life freedom movement was unlike anything the regime had ever faced. Led by young women and girls, it was a direct challenge to the ideological pillars of the republic. Women publicly burned their headscarves and cut their hair in these incredible acts of defiance. The movement went global. Yet the state's response followed the exact same brutal playbook. According to a United Nations fact-finding mission, the crackdown involved mass arbitrary arrests, torture, sexual violence, and the use of lethal force against peaceful protesters, resulting in hundreds more deaths. Throughout all these cycles of protest and repression, the Iranian economy, which was crushed by a combination of mismanagement and international sanctions, just continued to crater for ordinary citizens. Inflation soared, savings were wiped out, and access to essential goods became a daily struggle. Yet the IRGC's vast economic empire, which is directly tied to the Supreme Leader's office, remained insulated, continuing to fund its regional operations while the population at home suffered. This dual legacy of regional power abroad and deep, brutal repression at home is the complex and volatile inheritance Khamenei has now left behind. Understanding this history of absolute control is absolutely essential because it sets the stage for the global shockwave that followed the news of his death.
If you find this analysis valuable, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss our future work, because what comes next is the most intense part of this story. For years, Khamenei's health had been the subject of intense speculation. His advanced age and his reported battles with cancer made his status one of the most closely guarded state secrets in all of Iran. So when Iranian state television abruptly cut its programming to show Quranic verses and images of the leader, a traditional signifier of a national tragedy, the world's intelligence agencies understood exactly what it meant. The subsequent official confirmation unleashed an immediate and seismic global reaction. In strategic command centers and diplomatic back channels all around the world, years of contingency planning were instantly activated. The man who had been the single predictable center of Iranian power for over a generation was gone, and in his place was just a gaping void of uncertainty. In Washington, the White House Situation Room was fully staffed within minutes. Every active file related to Iran, the delicate nuclear negotiations, the status of detained American citizens, ongoing proxy conflicts in Iraq and Syria, the fragile balance of power in the Persian Gulf, all of it was suddenly thrown into chaos. For the Pentagon and the State Department, decades of strategy built around containing a single known adversary were rendered obsolete. The urgent question was no longer how to deal with Khamenei's Iran, but what kind of Iran would emerge from the inevitable power struggle? A more moderate Iran, or one led by hardliners even more hostile to the West? No one knew, and every single possibility had to be prepared for. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, based out of Bahrain, was placed on heightened alert, its carrier strike groups closely monitoring the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil supply passes. In Jerusalem, Israel's government convened an emergency security cabinet meeting as the military moved to its highest state of readiness. For Israeli leaders, Khamenei's Iran represented the nation's primary existential threat. His regime's relentless pursuit of nuclear capabilities and its funding and arming of Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza were seen as direct dangers to Israel's survival. But here's the thing. A stable, known enemy, however hostile, is one thing. A nuclear threshold state that's in the middle of a chaotic leadership transition, where hardline IRGC commanders might try to prove their revolutionary credentials with a provocative act, well, that was not a reassurance. It was viewed as the most dangerous scenario imaginable, a moment of maximum peril. Moscow expressed its formal condolences, while its strategists were urgently calculating the future of their deepening partnership with Tehran. Iranian drones, you see, had become a critical component of Russia's war effort in Ukraine, and any disruption to that supply line would be a significant blow. In European capitals, carefully worded diplomatic statements called for stability, while behind the scenes, leaders harbored a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, a new leader might provide an opening to revive the moribund nuclear deal. And in the Gulf Arab capitals of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, there was a quiet apprehension. While they viewed Khamenei as their chief regional rival, they also feared that a period of instability in Iran could unleash even greater chaos across the entire region. Oil prices spiked on global markets, not because of any immediate disruption, but simply because of the profound uncertainty that now shrouded the future of the world's most critical energy corridor. And so we arrive at the central, frankly terrifying question of what happens next. The future of Iran, and with it the stability of the entire Middle East, now hinges on a succession process that is deliberately opaque, intensely secretive, and ripe for conflict. The formal rules of the Republic provide a thin veneer of constitutional order, but the reality is a high-stakes power struggle between the country's most powerful and ruthless factions. This is a battle for the very soul of the revolution itself. According to Iran's constitution, the Assembly of Experts, a body of 88 senior clerics, is responsible for selecting the next supreme leader. On paper, it's an orderly, deliberative process. In reality, it is a political knife fight in the dark. The most widely discussed potential successor is Mashhad Khamenei, the second son of Ali Khamenei himself. For years, he has operated from the shadows, reportedly wielding immense influence within the intelligence services and cultivating loyalty inside the IRGC. But a dynastic succession, passing power from father to son, would be a deeply controversial betrayal of the Republic's founding principle of rejecting monarchy. The true kingmaker in this whole process will almost certainly be the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. No successor can take power or hold it without their blessing. This raises the chilling prospect that the next era of Iran will be defined not by a cleric, but by the will of the generals. And then, of course, there's the wild card: 70 million Iranians under the age of 40. This is a generation connected to the world, a generation that has grown up under sanctions with limited opportunities, and has repeatedly shown its willingness to risk everything to demand change. Will the crack in the system created by Khamenei's death finally let some light through? Or will the machine of the state simply close ranks and emerge even harder, more repressive than before? Ali Khamenei ruled for 36 years. He inherited a revolution and forged it into a fortress state. He outlasted 6 American presidents and defied a superpower. He leaves behind a nation of heartbreaking contradictions, an ancient civilization of poets, scientists, and artists governed by a modern system of surveillance and control, a people of extraordinary resilience trapped inside a machine that was built to outlast them. History teaches us that the death of a strong man is never just an ending. It is a door. And what comes through that door, reform or repression, hope or horror, a fragile peace or a wider war, it all depends entirely on the choices being made right now, in secret rooms, by people whose names the world may not even know for years. For over 3 decades, one man held the answer to what Iran would become. Now, a world holding its breath is about to find out whether this moment marks the beginning of something better or the beginning of something far more dangerous.